The committee will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recesses of the committee at any time. Welcome to today's hearing entitled Examining Federal Science Agency Actions to Secure the U.S. Science and Technology Enterprise. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. Thank you for joining us at this hearing on research security and protecting our taxpayer investments. Research theft is one of the single greatest threats to our competitiveness as a nation. It takes our hard-won innovation and puts it to work for our adversaries, hurting our economy and our ability to stay at the leading edge of tech discovery. This is no idle threat either. China has been explicit about their efforts to steal the results of our research to further their own technological progress. The Chinese Communist Party has made it clear they intend to surpass us as the global leader in science and technology, and they have no qualms about using intellectual property theft, forced technology acquisition, and other illicit means to do so. That's why this committee has been proactive in our response to the threat and has passed multiple bills to protect American research. In the 2020 NDAA, we passed the Securing American Science and Technology Act, which established an interagency committee within the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy to coordinate research security across the federal government. That same year, the Trump administration released National Security Presidential Memorandum 33 to direct a national response to protect our research and technology. In 2021, we went even further and began requiring all federal R&D funding applicants to disclose all of their sources of support, ensuring there are consistent conflict of interest policies across agencies. And in 2022, we passed several research security protections as a part of CHIPS and Science Act to halt the theft of U.S. innovation. We banned participation in malign foreign talent programs designed to recruit researchers to work for our adversaries. We also required plans to protect sensitive basic research and created an Office of Research Security and Policy at the NSF. Taken together, these measures provide a strong framework for research security. But to be of any use in protecting our investments, the administration needs to actually execute this framework. 4 years ago, we directed OSTP to coordinate and harmonize research security across the federal government. In that time, some progress was made. And while I'm pleased that this hearing sparked the release of 3 different policy guidance memos yesterday, congressional deadlines were missed and there's work still to be done. The government needs to have timely, clear, and uniform guidance on this issue for our agencies and our researchers. It's unacceptable that we don't have that. We've heard from agencies and stakeholders saying they are having trouble implementing their own research security guidelines because there are no government-wide standards yet. I'd like to request unanimous consent to enter into the record this statement from the Association of American Universities, as well as a letter sent by the AAU's president, Barbara Snyder, to Dr. Paranarthy earlier this week. Seeing no objection, so ordered. This letter states that since June of 2023 comment deadline, OSTP has not released final requirements or an update to the research community on the status of finalizing the requirements for research security programs. It goes on to emphasize the importance of harmonizing these requirements across the federal government and encourages OSTP to finalize the requirements as soon as possible. So today I expect to hear more about this work, and I'm hoping to get answers on why we aren't further along in this process. I understand that this is a complicated endeavor. America's strength in science and technology has been driven by our unique research ecosystem, which combines federal, academic, and private R&D efforts. For that system to work, we need a degree of open science that facilitates collaboration and transparency. I also want to be clear. We're not here to target researchers based on their race, but based on the actions they have taken. Our goal is to ensure that all federally funded scientists follow the U.S. principles of scientific fairness and integrity. The U.S. has benefited greatly from international scientific collaboration and the contribution of foreign-born scientists. I want the U.S. to remain a desirable place for brilliant minds to come and share their ideas. That's what makes us different than China. We celebrate freedom of thought, And when possible, we share information in good faith so we can maximize innovation. Our challenge is preserving this culture of transparency and openness, particularly when it comes to basic research, while protecting the sensitive information that could benefit our adversaries. I believe that we are up to this challenge. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today on how we can continue to keep America's R&D strong and productive. And with that, I yield back and recognize the ranking member, the gentlewoman from California, for an opening statement.
Well, thank you, Chairman Lucas, and for today's hearing, and I'd like to welcome our distinguished panel of witnesses. For several years now, really, for the history of this committee, we've taken the lead in Congress on grappling with hard questions around emerging technologies and implications for U.S. competitiveness, national security, and our society. Specifically, the question of when and how to secure federally funded research, it isn't new. We've been supporting research behind closed doors for decades because it's deemed classified or proprietary or otherwise subject to access restrictions. Everything else, certainly everything else labeled as fundamental research, is carried out and published in the open, as affirmed by President Ronald Reagan in National Security Decision Directive 189, and that's been reaffirmed several times since. Now, two things have changed. One is the U.S. is no longer the unquestioned leader in science, technology, and innovation. When we were, our risk calculus might have been different than it is now. In addition to our worthy but mostly like-minded competitors around the globe, we face a growing strategic competitor and, I would say, a threat from China. The second thing is the confluence of several emerging technologies with dual-use potential, including AI, biotech, and quantum. As the landscape continues to evolve, what's most important is that we continue to approach this challenge thoughtfully and clear-eyed about the trade-offs we're willing to make and not willing to make. Now, I'm proud of the history of this committee doing just that. Chairman Lucas was a great partner to then Chairwoman Johnson in developing thoughtful, widely vetted policy proposals in response to well-defined problems. For example, this committee developed the requirement for OSTP to lead in updating and coordinating the disparate and confusing disclosure requirements across federal agencies. And we also developed the requirement for federal research security training for all federally funded researchers. Now, primary purpose for this hearing, as the chairman has said, is to check on the implementation. We do have some questions about whether this has been speedy enough. It also presents this hearing an opportunity for the committee to continue to lead in the more esoteric but equally important debates about the risk calculus. I have long experience in immigration law, and I'd like to just cite a couple of quick facts. Since 2000, 40% of all U.S. Nobel laureates have been foreign-born. In addition, according to an analysis from the National Foundation for American Policy, more than half of the startups valued at $1 billion or more were started by immigrants to the United States. So we don't have to close our doors in the name of securing research, but we have to preserve our global vision and be the best country in the world to be a researcher. When it comes to scientific collaborations across borders, we all know that we can't do the biggest things all by ourselves. To solve global challenges, we need to pool global minds and resources. The COVID pandemic certainly reminded us of that. And finally, as the chairman has said, this isn't about targeting people by their ethnicity. Recently, I was at an event unveiling a statue of Norm Mineta, our former colleague. Norm was taken off the streets of San Jose with his family wearing his Boy Scout uniform and interned because the United States made a mistake. We confused ethnicity with loyalty. And of course, Norm went on to be a member of Congress, a cabinet secretary twice. Out of the camps walked the most decorated unit in World War II. We cannot confuse loyalty with ethnicity or race, and this committee has a strong record of that. We need to make sure that every effort is taken to avoid profiling based on race, ethnicity, or nationality. And I think that starts with this committee and is in keeping with the work we have done so far, because we do need to secure our national research facilities. So I look forward to this hearing. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for holding it, and I'm sure that it will be productive. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back, and I always appreciate her wise and insightful observations. Let me introduce our witnesses. Our first witness today is the Honorable Arthi Parvakar, Director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and Assistant to the President for Science and Technology. The doctor has led 2 different federal R&D agencies and worked with startups, large companies, universities, government labs, and nonprofits across a wide variety of sectors to create new solutions for critical challenges. Our next witness is Rebecca Kaiser, Dr. Rebecca Kaiser, Chief of Research, Security, and Strategy Policy for the National Science Foundation. Dr. Kaiser is the first to hold this post since its creation in 2020. She is a board member of Women in Aerospace and a member of the American Academy for the Advancement of Science, and has her bachelor's degree in Japanese Studies, master's degree in Politics of World Economy. That's a fascinating subject, I would acknowledge as an ag economist, and a doctorate in International Studies. Next, we have the Honorable Jerry Richmond, the Undersecretary of Science and Innovation at the Department of Energy. Dr. Richmond is also a member of the U.S. Naval Academy of Sciences and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and has been honored by numerous awards, including most recently the National Medal of Science in 2018. And our final witness is Dr. Michael Lauer, the Deputy Director of the External Research at the National Institute of Health. The doctor has received numerous awards, including the NIH Equal Employment Opportunity Award of the Year and the Arthur S. Fleming Award for exceptional federal service in the recognition of his efforts to grow a culture of learning and accountability. And with that, I now recognize Dr. Prabhakar for 5 minutes to present her testimony. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Lucas, Ranking Member Lofgren, all the members of the committee, thank you so much for this opportunity to appear before you today. I'm really pleased to be here with this table full of my colleagues. I am the President's Science and Technology Advisor and Director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. As you all know very well, science, technology, and innovation have been essential to American leadership in the world for many, many decades. That simply would not have been possible without the strong and consistent bipartisan support of this committee. I first appeared before this committee 30 years ago when I was NIST director, and so I've gotten to see that commitment over quite a few decades now directly. But today we are operating in a global strategic environment that is characterized by fierce military and economic competition. That's a competition among many actors, but I want to speak specifically about the People's Republic of China because they are the only competitor with both the intent to reshape the global order and the ability to harness both military and economic power to advance that objective. And when you look at that economic and military competition, technology and R&D are central to this competition. Like every other developed and developing country, the PRC pumps funding into R&D, it pursues global partnerships, it seeks to trade in high-tech goods. But the PRC is different than other global actors because of its use of illicit as well as licit means to acquire foreign technologies, because of its engagement in unfair competition in targeted industries, and because of its mandatory military-civil fusion. President Biden has taken unprecedented action in the face of this situation. This administration has levied record fines for export control violations. We've established new categories for export controls. We've expanded the controls on outbound investment from the U.S. in sensitive areas. And we are rebuilding America's lead in semiconductor manufacturing with the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act. As well, the Department of Justice has pursued trade secret theft and economic espionage cases. All of those actions are oriented towards industry, which is the major source of significant technology development. To address research security, the administration is implementing NSPM 33, NDAA provisions, and provisions of the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act, just as has been described. The purpose of all of these efforts is to make sure that universities and researchers understand our altered global landscape. The world is not the same as it was a few years ago. And that's so that they can be the first line of defense against the illicit activities in the research environment. Now, in addition to these realities of the PRC's actions, two other factors shape our work on research security. One is a fundamental American value that our nation values and respects each individual, and that xenophobia and racism are unacceptable. The other factor is just a practical fact. We know that immigrants to the U.S. and global interactions have been essential to America's preeminent position in research and in technology, and it clearly just wouldn't be to our advantage to create an atmosphere that is hostile to attracting the world's greatest minds, many of whom see freedom and opportunity when they see the United States. Getting research security right has been a complex task. It's one that has required more time than expected. And I want to highlight two important steps that we have accomplished. One is releasing the common disclosure forms for researchers to submit information. That's what allows agencies then to be able to identify problems. We also have released guidelines for restricting malign foreign talent recruitment programs. That's what's accomplished at this point. What we're working on right now in a very focused manner is guidance for research security programs in universities. It is vital that these programs protect national security and not just create another checkbox for administrators. That's the focus of our work. This is a very significant priority for me. I'll finish simply by saying that Congress has emphasized how important research security is. This administration agrees that on its importance, and that is why we are taking the actions that are necessary to continue American leadership in science and technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. I now recognize Dr. Kaiser for 5 minutes to present her testimony.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman Lucas. Chairman Lucas, Ranking Member Lofgren, and members of the committee. It is a privilege to appear before you today to discuss how NSF is working to secure the nation's research enterprise while investing in groundbreaking innovations. When I was doing my homework and reviewing NSF-funded research in your districts, I saw that it ranged from cybersecurity education to advanced manufacturing. And now I see, of course, why other countries covet the U.S. research ecosystem. At this time of unprecedented global competition and concerning actions by the government of the People's Republic of China, addressing research security is an essential part of meeting NSF's mission, and it's critical to our nation's economic and national security. In 2020, acting on the recommendations of national security experts, and thanks to this committee, NSF created my current position. Over the past 3.5 years, the agency has moved quickly to implement many reforms and new requirements to help safeguard the taxpayers' investments in NSF-funded research. In doing so, we've developed a set of basic principles that guide our strategy to research security. First, we need to be clear, comprehensive, and consistent. NSF is focused on working to develop practical, implementable policies for disclosure and to address research security risks while minimizing administrative overhead. In 2019 and 2020, NSF actions included emphasizing compliance with disclosure requirements both for NSF staff and NSF-funded institutions and researchers, barring NSF staff from participating in foreign talent recruitment programs, and requiring annual security training for all NSF employees. In addition, after passage of the CHIPS and Science Act, NSF has implemented the prohibition on funding for researchers who participate in malign foreign talent programs. Now we need to scale research security efforts to the risk, and we're identifying and addressing issues that may be unique or more prevalent in particular areas of research. To be vigilant, we've developed a keen focus on data and analysis. It's been critical for NSF to develop and fund capabilities to better understand the scope and the scale of research security issues and potential breaches. NSF's system uses open source data and allows the agency to assess whether affiliations, sources of funding, patents, collaborators, company ownership, etc., have been reported properly. It further analyzes author affiliations, clusters proposals and awards by topic, researcher, and country, and identifies inconsistencies in materials submitted by researchers. Importantly, these analytical tools can identify participation in malign foreign talent programs, even when that participation is not disclosed. However, we need to get beyond compliance and develop robust education and outreach efforts to transition from a culture of compliance to one of partnership. NSF and our partners have focused intensively on reaching out to the academic community to build awareness, understanding, and shared commitment. To be successful, we must provide training and tools for researchers. On January 30th, NSF launched 4 interactive online research security training modules that we developed in partnership with our agency counterparts that are available to researchers and institutions across the U.S. They provide researchers with clear guidelines, effective strategies to protect against existing and emerging research security threats. Furthermore, NSF is in the process of establishing the Information Sharing and Analysis Organization called for in the CHIPS and Science Act. This center will provide needed information and tools to the research community. NSF is currently reviewing proposals, and we expect to make an award this summer. We're confident that we'll be able to establish an innovative center that strengthens the security of our national research enterprise as envisioned by the law. And finally, we must also preserve and amplify the value of the research ecosystem. This requires maintaining and actively promoting the values that make the research enterprise successful: openness, transparency, reciprocity, and collaboration. NSF welcomes and encourages international collaboration with like-minded partners. It's essential to pursue the frontiers of science. Thank you very much for this opportunity to testify before you today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Doctor. I now recognize Dr. Richmond for 5 minutes to present her testimony.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chairman Lucas, Ranking Member Lofgren, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the Department of Energy's approach to research security. We appreciate the committee's sustained efforts to understand this important topic and also develop constructive policies. We also appreciate the close collaboration that we have with our other agencies who are here. Research security has been a priority for the Department of Energy for decades, dating back to the Manhattan Project. It is enshrined in our mission to ensure America's security and prosperity by addressing its energy, environmental, and nuclear challenges through transformative science and technology solutions. And what a broad mission that is, from nuclear security to openly conducted basic science in the Office of Science, from funding projects at the 17 national laboratories to supporting research universities all across the country, and more recently to funding development and deployment of those discoveries while building the science and technology workforce. The DOE's mission is critical to our national security and economic security. In my nearly 50-year career in research in the physical sciences, I personally have witnessed the gradual and now increasingly difficult task of balancing the benefit of open science enterprise and the risks associated with countries of concern, international collaborations, meetings, and contracts in emerging technologies that have the potential national and economic competitive implications that are requiring more careful analysis to ensure that the risks are not compromising the benefits. We're in a different world today, as you recognize. Where increasing intents and actions of malign foreign governments pose inaccessible risks to the nation and to the Department of Energy specifically. It is time, a time when we are pushing the frontier of new technology advances, and success hinges on our nation's ability to recruit the best and the brightest scientists and engineers in the world. The Department of Energy takes these threats to our research security very seriously. We take a comprehensive and robust approach to guard against undue foreign influence, which is responsive to changing legislative requirements. Because of the very broad DOE research portfolio, we've expanded our definition of research security to research, technology, economic security, or RTES, which addresses risk mitigations for each of these research categories. So DOE has taken three major actions to address the many forms of RTES risks. First, DOE enhanced its existing process to ensure that risks of undue foreign influence are considered early in the competitive process and throughout the life cycle of a supported project or loan. Specifically, no person participating in a foreign talent project sponsored by a country of concern may participate in a project. Applicants must be fully transparent with respect to foreign connections associated with proposed participants, both individuals and entities. Second, the department has established a new RTES office, which will implement and continuously refine DOE's process for financial assistance and loan projects, build awareness internally within DOE on RTES issues, engage with external stakeholders, and assist in the review of DOE national laboratory agreements with involving foreign entities. And third, DOE has established a department-wide working group that reports to the Secretary's office to address RTES issues. The group is focused on developing and updating RTES policies. DOE has also established RTES risk mitigation policies designed to protect our national laboratories. Of particular note is the Science and Technology Risk Matrix, developed in partnership with the laboratories, that is designed to protect the most critical emerging research and technologies. The matrix highlights economic and international competitiveness concerns beyond existing controls associated with national security on export controls. National laboratories use this risk matrix every day to assess international transactions, including requests for foreign national access to our laboratories, staff travel to countries of concern on restricted topics, and engagement requests from countries of concern with national laboratories. So, thank you. Thank you to this committee for highlighting in CHIPS and Science how tools such as the Science and Technology Risk Matrix are important to our work to address research security. The department strives to strike the right balance between protecting what has been determined to be most important to DOE and the nation, while also ensuring our policies do not negatively impact our research ecosystem. This is a process that requires continuing refinement as the world changes, coupled with close dialogue with other national laboratories, university partners, and of course, all of you. So thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to answering your questions on these important topics.
Thank you, Doctor. I now recognize Dr. Lauer for 5 minutes to present his testimony.
Chair Lucas, Ranking Member Lofgren, and distinguished members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you to testify on the work that NIH is doing to protect the integrity of the U.S. biomedical research enterprise from inappropriate foreign interference. It is through these efforts that NIH enables scientific discovery while assuring honesty, transparency, integrity, fair merit-based competition, and protection of intellectual capital and proprietary information. We appreciate the committee's continued interest and support of our efforts to address research security issues. As the largest public funder of biomedical research, NIH sets the standard for innovation and scientific discovery. We promote the highest levels of scientific integrity and public accountability in the conduct of science. We promote open collaboration by leveraging formal and informal cooperation of scientists at research institutions around the world. This exchange of knowledge is an essential part of innovation and is critical to our global competitiveness. Some foreign entities and governments, however, have exploited the openness of our research system in order to obtain a competitive advantage. In 2018, NIH described its observations about certain behaviors which do not align with our focus on integrity. The description was developed as a response to NIH learning in 2016 about certain inappropriate activities of some peer reviewers who had been involved with foreign talent recruitment programs or other foreign entities. These behaviors include stealth employment, often at the behest of malign foreign talent recruitment programs, undisclosed and sometimes duplicative sources of foreign research support, undisclosed financial conflicts of interest, sometimes involving tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars given directly to scientists in personal bank accounts or even in cash, breaches of peer review integrity rules, and repeated misrepresentations to institutional officials and to NIH. These misrepresentations are sometimes abetted by foreign institutions in the form of what we call comfort letters, which contain demonstrably false information and can only be interpreted as attempts to mislead American universities and U.S. government agencies. Since 2018, NIH has received allegations involving over 600 scientists. We, in our Office of Extramural Research, have contacted institutions in 255 cases where there were likely foreign interference concerns with scientific or budgetary overlap, overcommitment, or undisclosed financial conflicts of interest. Our efforts have led to hundreds of administrative actions on grants, 3 criminal convictions, and 2 false claims civil settlements. Nonetheless, it is important to keep in mind that fewer than 1% of the approximately 40,000 NIH-funded principal investigator scientists have been linked to foreign interference concerns. Since 2020, the number of new allegations of undue foreign interference have substantially declined, and most have come from university self-disclosures. This trend may be related to outreach on the part of government agencies and professional groups. We appreciate the proactive efforts many recipient institutions are taking to comply with long-standing disclosure requirements. NIH has no tolerance for breaches of integrity or misuse of taxpayer funds. It is never acceptable for scientists or institutions to hide significant financial interests or to provide information that is not true, complete, or accurate, as this behavior may lead our agency to make inappropriate funding decisions. It is particularly concerning when problematic behavior occurs at the instigation of or with the support of malign foreign actors. We are pleased to work with our colleagues in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and the other agencies who are here on implementing NSPM 33. Our work with the NSF, with OSTP, and with our other colleagues here help create updated forms, instructions, and policy terminology for disclosure documents that also aim to reduce administrative burdens. We have also partnered with other agencies and participated in national academies and international programs. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Doctor, and I want to thank all the witnesses for your insightful testimony. The chair now recognizes himself for 5 minutes. Dr. Parbhakar, as you mentioned in your testimony, your office published draft guidance on requirements for research security programs at the universities in March of last year. There's been no communication from OSTP on any progress made since then. Could you please elaborate on what has caused the delay and provide an update on when the final guidance will be issued?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share your focus on this issue. The research security program guidance is the key thing that we now need to get done, and it is the focus of considerable effort in our office and working with our colleagues. What we learned from the feedback from the community and the inside and outside of government, but across the research base, from that draft guidance that we put out, gave us considerable pause. We heard many comments on many aspects of the draft guidance. They included concerns about administrative burden, as you might expect, because a lot of reporting and training requirements were articulated in that draft guidance. A burden of an administrative burden that, of course, falls even heavier on smaller research institutions. I think that's a factor. What really has concerned me even more deeply is what I want to be sure of is that we don't turn this research security program process into a checklist that an administrator signs off on. The purpose is to make sure that researchers understand this altered landscape so that in their ongoing interactions and when they are recruiting students and postdocs, when they're interacting in the global environment, that they have an awareness of what's going on. And until we do that, that research security program isn't really going to work. So that has turned out to be more complex and taking us much longer than I would like. But I want to assure you that it is a priority and a focus for me and my team.
Let me offer one follow-up question along that lines. This is an issue that is critically important to the committee and for so many purposes overall. If you need any additional authorities or directives from Congress to mandate this, please let us know. We want to help facilitate this process as quickly and as effectively as possible.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate that.
Dr. Kaiser, Congress directed the NSF in the CHIPS and Science Act to develop a plan to identify research areas that require access to controlled, unclassified, or classified information that may pose a greater risk to our S&T enterprise. Should they be targeted by our adversaries, of course? Since the passage of CHIPS and Science Act in August of 2022, what steps has the NSF taken to develop such a plan?
We have developed a draft risk rubric, and we have announced this risk rubric in our 2024 policy guidance document. The risk rubric is in draft because we're carefully considering the areas in which we need to assess risk according to NSF's mission of funding fundamental research. So this draft has areas of technology and research that might be higher risk. It has a column to assess undisclosed international affiliations and sources of funding. It has a column to address affiliations with countries of concern. We're in the process now of road testing this rubric with the JASON group, which is a group of scientists in the community who do work for the national government in areas of science and security. We'll get their feedback, and then we plan to coordinate this risk rubric with the community and then make it transparent and start implementing. At the same time, we're not waiting before we assess risk in the new directorate, the Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Directorate, because we do see an enhanced risk because this is research that is more use-inspired, translational, and of interest to our adversaries. So we've been working from the TIP Directorate from the start. We have language in the Directorate's solicitations requiring research security programs and points of contact for our awardees. And we've been working also, we have a ban on reviewers for those programs participating in foreign talent recruitment programs.
Ranking Member, indulge me for one more question. Dr. Prabhakar. This committee's first hearing of the 118th Congress focused on considerations for developing a national science and technology strategy that would ensure a comprehensive whole-of-government approach to research and development and maximizes the return on taxpayer-funded investments. Congress directed the OSTP to develop this strategy a little later than 1 year after the implementation of the quadrennial Science and Technology Review. This committee expected the quadrennial review to be completed by December 31, 2023. Can you give us a progress update on the process of developing the review and when you would anticipate its completion?
The Quadrennial Science and Technology Review is work that's underway with our interagency process. We've made good progress and hope to be able to get that out quite soon. I want to say I thought those were just really useful and important provisions, and taking that broad look at what we're doing and then where we need to go with science and technology is, I think that's core to our mission, and I appreciated the opportunity to provide both of those reports. Look forward to rolling that out soon.
And I very much appreciate that the old adage about haste makes waste, but the sooner the better so that we can respond to it. With that, yield back and recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this hearing is a very useful one. Certainly, we need to be prudent in terms of protecting the integrity of our research enterprise. On the other hand, we don't want to kill our research enterprise. As I mentioned in my opening statement, we have a very large number of foreign students who have come here. Really, this is the best place to go for science research. In fact, more than half of STEM advanced degree recipients in the United States are international students, 16% of them from China. So here's the question. I mean, how do we balance our need to attract the smartest people in the world, want to come here, become Americans in most cases, with the need to protect against some bad actors? How do we get that balance? Are we losing in that balance with the efforts that we're making? Dr. Prabhakar, can you address that?
Thank you so much, Ranking Member Lofgren. You put your finger on what makes this challenge so complex. And the measures that were described in law and that we are implementing now, I think, are exactly the right place to start. The specific procedures and having a common form, having the guidance from agencies so that awareness starts growing in the research enterprise, I think is an important place to start. These are the mechanisms, but again, the endpoint, the picture in my head is what success looks like is that as you go through the education process, as you start into research, as you become an American researcher in one of our universities or research institutions, part of what you understand about the world is how important it is to have these global collaborations, the warm embrace of immigrants who have brought so much to our science and technology enterprise, and that we're no longer naive in the research community and understand that there are malign actors and illicit activities. Simply being aware is the first place to start. And to me, that's the point of all of these mechanisms. I think we've made some progress in raising that awareness, and as we complete our work, that's where we need to get to.
Doctor, it took, as we mentioned, longer than we hoped, but we were glad to see the release yesterday of the common disclosure forms and talent recruitment programs. But universities are still seeking guidance for standards for research security programs. When do we expect that guidance to be issued?
Yeah, yes, they are looking for that. I know, I hear their frustration, and I share it because I think we've introduced these ideas, but now we actually need to be clear with everyone exactly what they need to implement. So I understand that urgency. We are working through the very significant comments that we received on the draft guidance and revectoring accordingly. That is work that's happening with the interagency process, and it's a significant focus. It's a personal priority for me because I think we need to get this sorted and clear for everyone. We are very much looking forward to getting that rolled out and completed.
Doctors Kaiser, Lauer, and Richmond, I am interested in what kind of guidance each of you or your institutions are providing to our academic world, awaiting the additional guidance that Dr. Prabhakar just mentioned.
I can start. We, of course, are working very closely with OSTP through the Research Security Subcommittee on this guidance to universities for research security programs. We have worked together as well in releasing the training that I mentioned. And the training is a start. In my view, it is the beginning of this building of this culture of research security so that there's the awareness there. Then it will build on the next step of having the standards of how to build an actual research security program itself.
So how do we, I mean, I want to hear from the other two doctors, but I'm also concerned that we're not giving conflicting advice between the various agencies, if you can address that as well.
Yes, absolutely. We talk pretty much every day to make sure that we're coordinating on our policies going out to universities. As an example, we mentioned this risk rubric effort that I'm dealing with, and I talk to Dr. Richmond's staff frequently about their S&T matrix to make sure that we are consistent in what we're doing for the community. We also work together on the training and the disclosure. As you said, I think what's key is that we also share information, which is another aspect of NSPM 33 that we'll be working on, to develop an information sharing mechanism among our agencies that protects the privacy of researchers, but still shares information on research security with one another. So we have this informal mechanism, and then through the subcommittee, we're also working on this more formal mechanism.
Well, let me, first of all, that's a really important question, and we certainly are very active with the other agencies to put this together. We've had a disclosure form since 2022 that we have on the web that has a lot of details of what we need, because we just, we just have to put things into operation while we wait to get the coordination. But I would say that even what we have in the disclosure forms now, they're quite consistent with what we're working with other agencies too. And we're also sharing all the details of our unclassified risk matrix, because that is kind of a model that we know to work forward. So I really think that this is the agency, interagency working group is great, and NSTC working, we've been leadership in that. It's a tough one, but the Department of Energy has had to step out and say, we're doing this right now because we've got grants coming in. We've got to do this. We would just like to see more consistency.
I'll just add, I'll echo the comments of my colleagues. There's been extensive coordination, but I'll also add that we're trying to send a message that this is not either or, it's both and. We can have security and integrity and at the same time have proper collaboration. Proper collaborations do not involve stealth employment, duplicative funding, undisclosed financial conflicts of interest, or repeated misrepresentations. By sending that message in various ways, in many ways, we hope that we can meet exactly that balance. I would also say that the fact that we're getting so many self-disclosures and that the majority of our cases now are self-disclosures says something about the effectiveness of the work that everybody here is doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your indulgence in my going over the time, and I yield back.
Gentlelady's time's expired. The chair turns to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Posey, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Lucas. Dr. Prabhakar, it's been almost 6 months since the administration extended the deadline for the U.S.-China Agreement on Cooperation in Science and Technology to reportedly allow time to negotiate a new agreement. Does the administration plan to extend the S&T agreement with China? And if so, what new terms are being negotiated or included?
Mr. Posey, thank you for your question. That matter of the Science and Technology Agreement is being handled by the State Department, and very much to your point, the purpose of that extension was to consider and to weigh and to negotiate terms, recognizing the reality and the environment that we're currently in. And that matter is under consideration today at the State Department. And so I don't have any more specifics, unfortunately.
I know. The State Department actually prompted me to file a bill on solar panels. I don't know if you're really familiar with it or not, but one thing President Trump and President Obama agreed upon is that we need to have tariffs on China's solar panels. They do them with slave labor, child labor, and they can undercut American products price-wise, obviously, to be non-competitive. And so the tariffs were followed through with both those administrations. So China started shipping their China-made solar panels through Indonesia, Thailand, and getting a label slapped on them, made in Indonesia and China, and avoiding the tariffs. The State Department actually fleshed this out and exposed this. And I filed a bill to reinstate the tariffs in all fairness to American productivity, and passed in the House, passed in the Senate, and the President vetoed it. So I have a little bit of difficulty wondering about the sincerity of putting our country first in these agreements. Can you give me some examples where we've been on the American side and not the Chinese side on some of these issues?
Mr. Posey, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that particular matter. I've referred to several of the actions that this administration has taken to deal specifically with Chinese industrial espionage, cases that the Department of Justice is pursuing, very strategic thinking about advanced technologies, including artificial intelligence, and what is required in export controls to make sure that we're not simply allowing the PRC to take our most advanced semiconductors, for example, and use them in military systems that we could face in an adversarial situation. That has been the consistent strategy in the work and the thinking across the administration in dealing with the PRC in this heightened environment.
Thank you for that. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to include in the record the GAO report, Research, Security, and Strengthening Interagency Cooperation could help agencies safeguard federal funding from foreign threats.
Seeing no objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see my time is about to expire, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time expired. The chair now turns to the gentlelady from Oregon, Ms. Bonamici, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Lucas, Ranking Member Lofgren. Thank you to the witnesses. A special warm welcome to Dr. Richmond, who comes to the Department of Energy via the University of Oregon. Glad you're here. You know, the successful culture of federal research in the United States relies on open access to scientific information, data, and practices between and among federal research agencies and academic and research institutions, and often international partners. I think about all the work that's going on, for example, in Northwest Oregon, so supercomputing, semiconductors, artificial intelligence, quantum computing. We know that to remain a leader in these fields, we must cultivate a collaborative science ecosystem that preserves integrity without imposing unintended costs on institutions that create a chilling effect on recruiting top scientific talent to the United States. Leading federal research institutions, and I think back home about University of Oregon and Oregon State University, they're taking this issue seriously. They're working to implement necessary compliance measures, creating, they're hiring cybersecurity personnel, reallocating time and funding to manage contracts and comply with training, and creating new administrative departments to meet these security requirements. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Prabhakar. You noted that the increased administrative burden and costs are affecting the implementation of the security guidance. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about your work to develop and communicate research security standards, and are research funding agencies providing any resources to institutions to help them alleviate these costs, and would you need dedicated funding to do that?
Thank you, Representative Bonamici, because this is a practical issue that you're raising and that universities are raising. This is part of what we have to wrestle through as we finalize the research security program guidance. And as that crystallizes, I think we'll be in a much better position to assess what the cost and impact will be to universities. A lot of the complexity is thinking through what it means, not just for our premier research universities that have very substantial research funding, but also very substantial administrative structures to be able to handle today's administrative issues. And then, for them, this will be an additional task, but it'll be an increment to something that they're already geared up to do. I think about the research universities around the country, HBCUs, minority serving institutions, but across every part of our country, we have so much research talent, and we've already been concerned that it's not being unlocked because those smaller institutions don't have the staff to help faculty member write useful proposals. Right. So I think NSF, has, and perhaps NIH, I know at NSF there have been really important efforts to make sure we boost that capacity for all of our research institutions that aren't already fully staffed up. And I think this will then add, the research security measures then will add to that mix.
I appreciate that very much. And Dr. Richmond, welcome. I want to follow up on Ranking Member Lofgren's line of questioning. You credit U.S. leadership in science and technology research to our open scientific enterprise, which is critical. And you explain that thoughtful international collaboration strengthens our competitiveness and encourages talented researchers to contribute to the cutting edge work that's being done here. So has the increased suspicion in the name of research security led to reluctance by international partners to engage in Department of Energy funded research? And also, how can you talk a little bit about what it looks like to have a research security requirement that doesn't hinder our ability to recruit and retain international talent?
Well, thank you very much for that question, because do you mind if I share a story?
Please do.
I was recently at one of our major universities, and I was talking to a young, sort of mid-career faculty member from China. And he's built a wonderful program there in material science, has a great research group there. And he was almost in tears when he said, "I'm scared now. I'm scared that they'll find something in my record that'll make me have to leave. And I'm not involved in any talent program." But it was just, when I think about those that are from other countries, and even some of our own American scientists that worry that what they've built now is being threatened. And so I hear it, I see it. And so I think that's why it's so important at our universities to develop cultures around them, which is about security, and also welcoming those that we need to have in the town.
Absolutely. It's critical that we get it right. So I appreciate all your testimony and what you're doing. And I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Dr. Babin, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, witnesses, for being here. Dr. Prabhakar, last October, FBI Director Chris Wray joined the heads of allied foreign law enforcement agencies in highlighting the unique threat the Chinese Communist Party presents to the U.S. scientific enterprise. The quote is, the People's Republic of China represents the defining threat of this generation, this era. There is no country that presents a broader, more comprehensive threat to our ideas, our innovation, our economic security, and ultimately our national security. We have seen efforts by the Chinese government, directly or indirectly, trying to steal intellectual property, trade secrets, personal data, all across the country. We're talking everything from Fortune 100 companies down to smaller startups. We're talking about agriculture, biotech, healthcare, robotics, aviation, academic research. We probably have somewhere in the order of 2,000 active investigations that are just related to the Chinese government's effort to steal information. Very quickly, do you agree with Chris Wray's assessment?
Yes, I think it's a good summary of the situation we're
Yes, ma'am.
facing.
Thank you. President Reagan, back in the 80s, issued a National Security Decision Directive 189, which exempted foundational research, both basic and applied, from export controls. Given Director Wray's assessment, just read, do you believe that this exemption should be revisited?
Thank you for the question. I think it really gets at the heart of what we are grappling with. I want to just take a moment to share a personal reflection. A decade ago, I had returned to public service to lead DARPA, where I had served many years earlier. When I was a program manager at DARPA, the Cold War ended. One day I came to work and there was no longer a Soviet Union. So I saw that chapter of what it meant to try to drive very advanced science and technology in the geopolitics of the late 80s and early 90s. When I returned in 2012, what I found was that the world had changed in a very important set of ways. And the most striking thing was the behavior of the PRC. And that, I think it was starting to become visible in that time period. President Xi, I think, has made a shift that is quite palpable. And what I've seen over the last decade is very much summarized in your remarks, is a PRC that is aggressive. Again, many countries are using technology to try to craft the future, but they are taking it to a place that is causing a different set of problems, and that's very much what we are grappling with in this research.
Well, let me ask this. Does China offer the United States and other foreign nations reciprocal waivers for the export of their foundational research? And if not, why should we maintain this waiver? Do you know the answer to that?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure the specific issue to which that comment refers.
Does the PRC offer other nations reciprocal waivers?
I'm so sorry, sir. I'm not sure exactly what waivers that's in reference to.
Well,
I'm happy to follow up if that's useful.
yes,
with you,
ma'am.
staff.
Well, what I'm trying to say is I think they do not offer waivers to the United States and other foreign nations when it comes to their Chinese companies, Chinese researchers, or joint U.S.-China researchers. So my question is, if they don't offer us waivers, why should we offer them waivers? That's my question.
I'm not familiar with where we might be offering waivers. I think that's what I'm not understanding. So I'm happy to follow up if that's useful. Yeah.
Okay. One other thing here, I've got a minute left. This is also to you. Yesterday, you released new disclosure guidelines for federal researchers. As you know, NASA is subject to the Wolf Amendment, which prohibits NASA funding of cooperation with China. A 2022 NASA Inspector General report on NASA insider threats highlighted a number of instances of criminal convictions tied to violations of research security laws and policies related to the Chinese Communist Party. However, one such case that the Department of Justice brought against a University of Tennessee Knoxville professor who was also a paid professor at the Beijing University of Technology during that summer, was dismissed because of uncertainty about the China funding restriction and vagueness of disclosure guidelines. Do you believe the new disclosure guidelines that you recently issued will prevent cases like the one I just mentioned, where researchers are, quote, unaware, unquote, of restrictions? NASA and the University of Tennessee, Knoxville were very clear, but that didn't seem to matter in the courtroom. So how will these new guidelines ensure greater awareness than what is already required?
Thank you for that question. That is precisely the purpose of the work that we are doing, is to make sure that every researcher is completely clear in this new geopolitics that we are dealing with. And that change is one that many researchers are not yet caught up to. That's exactly why we are doing this work.
Well, we got a fine line to walk here. We don't want to run people off, which has happened in the past, but we also have to protect our information. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. The chair now recognizes the lady from Michigan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking of global challenges and tensions, many of you know that we have a select committee on strategic competition with the Chinese Communist Party, and it is a bipartisan select committee run by Mike Gallagher as the chair and Raja Krishnamurthy as the ranking member. And the select committee issued in December a set of recommendations to bolster the U.S. and our economic competitiveness, making such recommendations as that we must, here in the United States of America, fund open peer-reviewed research of critical technologies. And it's important to note that this recommendation was approved in a bipartisan, unanimous fashion. So to the panel, could you highlight why this recommendation, investing in open research at the levels authorized in CHIPS and Science on topics like biotechnology, quantum, and artificial intelligence is absolutely essential to maintaining our global leadership? And I don't know if Dr. Kaiser wants to start, or
Sure.
Richmond.
Thank you very much for the question. Open research is extremely important, and in my view, we have to communicate very clearly to the community about the concerns in research security, which are not because of openness, but rather they are because other countries are taking advantage of our openness. And I'll tell you what I mean by this. Openness is things like things we're funding in your district, such as a global center on climate change, which is collaboration with many other countries, including Canada. We want this data on climate change to be made open so that other researchers can use it, they can challenge it, they can improve on it, and they can continue to innovate. And we can't let adversaries keep us from doing that. That way they win. So at the same time, we need to communicate what issues are we worried about. Well, we're worried about someone coming into the United States or a U.S. researcher taking pre-publication research before it's even made open and taking it to an adversarial country to be used for military civil fusion purposes. That's what we're concerned about. And we have to be just very, very clear about that and clear about that distinction.
And Dr. Prabhakar, I just in your role at OSTP, have you, your very important role, by the way, have you observed any of the, maybe potentially chilling effects on scientists when open collaborative science is demonized, and the impact that might be having on our economic competitiveness?
I thought that the Undersecretary's story was telling, and we know researchers have left the United States and returned to China to China's benefit. That happens with friendly countries all around the world, and so that could be okay. But we also know that ultimately it is to our economic detriment. And so let's not be driving these people away, for sure. I have certainly heard from the Asian American and the Asian researcher community about the chilling effect that this whole issue has had. And part of why we have to get these issues resolved is to establish research security and to make sure that that uncertainty is removed and that people can go forth and do the work that we need them to do.
And you're playing at OSTP such a critical role in keeping scientific research safe, secure, and open. And just with the minute remaining, could you just to give you a moment to elaborate on how OSTP coordinates with other federal agencies to support open, above board scientific research?
The reason I took this job when the president asked me was because my great passion is science, technology, and innovation for creating the future for our country. And that doesn't happen unless this whole enterprise is robust. And what we're talking about today, research security, is part of making sure it's robust in the environment that we live in. And as we all know, there is much more. It is funding support. It is making sure that we not only write the best research papers, but that we harness that information and build jobs and industries in every part of the country. It's about meeting our health challenges in this country. It's about dealing with the climate. So that is our everyday work, and getting research security right is foundational to achieving all of that.
And just looking out, right, it is such a treat to have NSF, Department of Energy, and in unique fashion, the National Institute of Health here at the Science Committee. And really want to salute all of you and the agencies you represent, the scientists and those contributing to this enterprise in the United States of America. So thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Fleshman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this important hearing. To the distinguished panel, thank you very much for your very insightful testimony today. I'm Chuck Fleischman. I actually represent the Oak Ridge Reservation and all the wonderful things it entails, so I work very closely with the Department of Energy. I have 2 questions, so I'm going to ask for a little bit of brevity in response. But the first one is on standardization. The use of common forms such as BioSketch and other support and consistent definitions across agencies are a welcome step for our government, academic, and industry research institutions towards harmonization. Standardization makes it easier for researchers to comply, which in turn safeguards the research enterprise. My question is, how will federal departments and agencies continue working together to expand on the standardization of definitions and harmonization of procedure?
I'm happy to start. We put out the common form through the interagency process a few months ago, and then just recently now have put out guidance to agencies to help them make sure that they are getting on the same page about using that. We understand that different agencies have different missions, and there will be times when exceptions are needed, but our current guidance asks that we be informed of that. And I think that this is the process that will get us to a place that reduces the burden, but actually allows for the transparency that we need.
Thank you. Doctor?
Thank you. NSF has implemented the common forms, and I know NIH has as well, and Department of Energy, so we're really very much in sync on this. Something now that we have to focus on is communication to the community. Number one, here's what the common form means, here's how we're using your information, and here's why we need it. And number two, we are not interested in going after anyone for making a mistake on the disclosure. This is about making sure that we have all the information that we need to make sound funding decisions and get rid of any concerning conflicts of interest or conflicts of commitment.
Thank you.
So I would say at the Department of Energy, we've done this for a long time with our national laboratories. And so it's not just the information that you gather, but it's also how you use that and how you go back and forth with the institution to get them to figure out what's going on. And so I think there's a lot, and other agencies have asked us to share the risk matrix, which we've released, because that helps put together, it's sort of like stoplight, green light, yellow light, red light, on what you should go forward with and be cautious about. So,
Thank you. Dr. Lara?
Congressman, completely agree with your sentiments. I would say that one aspect of this whole experience is that the agencies have been working very closely with one another. Our staff at NIH and the staff at NSF have spent probably thousands of hours working on every last detail of these forms as well as the research security programs. And that's created a culture of standardization, collaboration, and making things as easy as possible for the research community.
Thank you. In my waning moments, the security cost accessibility question. To build upon harmonization across government, we all recognize research security carries additional costs for institutions, such as administrative effort and IT system upgrades. How can research security standards be implemented in a manner that allows for more organizations, such as small or emerging research institutions, to participate?
Thanks. Through the Secure Center that we are going to be funding, we want to provide assistance, information, tools to all entities, large and small, to help them in the establishment of these research security programs. In fact, my guidance to the team that's currently reviewing these proposals for the center is we want the democratization of research security, and the center needs to help in that regard. We also are establishing a track through the granted program that Dr. Prabhakar mentioned, which is a program to assist emerging research institutions, and it will be a track in research security as well to help them.
And I would say that a number of our national laboratories are providing help with the smaller institutions to provide advice on how to go forward. So I'm really proud of what many of our national laboratories are doing, including Oak Ridge.
Thank you.
We're working very closely, of course, with our partner agencies, and we also have a number of efforts underway at NIH to enhance the capacity of research institutions.
Thank you. I thank the panel. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Sorensen, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Lofgren, for convening this hearing, and our witnesses for your willingness to appear with us here today. Openness is a hallmark of the U.S. research ecosystem. Before my career here in Congress, I was a meteorologist by trade, also one of the people that took the risk to start talking about how climate was impacting the weather some 15 years ago. I only did that because I was the trusted communicator of that science. I only did that because I could trust the science that I was learning from. The purpose of our meeting here today is to protect proprietary technology and scientific discoveries. So I want to continue from what my colleague from Michigan was talking about with Dr. Prabhakar and Dr. Kaiser. How can we continue to accelerate the research with respect to climate while keeping it and keeping the politics out of it, but keeping the science the focal point?
Thank you for that question. It's good to see you again, Representative. I'll point to the National Climate Assessment, the 5th National Climate Assessment that OSTP produced and that the President launched in November of last year, I believe. This is a regular assessment of what is happening with climate change in America. And what that report, this particular report, found was something I think Americans across our country see very directly today, is that the weather is changing, that the effects of the many effects of a changing climate in terms of intensified storms, in terms of droughts and wildfires. I'm a Californian and I have dealt with the smoke there many, many times. That is very visible to everyone, and I think understanding that comprehensively and clearly, rolling up that research and making it useful to people so that they can understand what's happening community by community was a lot of the work that we did in that report. We also found that people are taking action across the country, and I found that very heartening because I think this is a problem that when you're in the middle of a storm, it can feel overwhelming and as if there is no turnaround in the future. But in fact, people are taking action across the country with the work that this Congress has done with the bipartisan infrastructure law, with the Inflation Reduction Act. This administration has moved out with some of the most significant actions on mitigating climate change. And all of that was, we're starting to see that now in the climate assessment. Everything I just described relies on exactly what you said, which is having a solid base of scientific research. So that continues to be a priority, I know, for everyone here.
And NSF has funded a global center, as you know, for international collaboration in climate change research. And to me, working internationally on our processes, on our research, only bolsters the trust in that research itself. And it's related to research security and research integrity. In fact, the UK calls their research security effort trusted research, because if you can build integrity into every step, and be transparent about how the research is conducted, you build the trust. And so that's what we're focusing on as well.
I appreciate that. I have just about a minute left. I want to go back to you, Dr. Prabhakar. This committee's Space and Aeronautics Subcommittee, on which I serve as a ranking member, held a hearing just yesterday in this room talking about NASA's plans for decommissioning the International Space Station. The transition will require NASA to go from being the owner and operator of the International Space Station to becoming a customer for one of our commercial space stations. So how might research security policies, practices, and risk postures be different for the federal government, federally funded research, and as we transition, to what extent is OSTP considering commercial partnerships and developing research security guidance to federal agencies?
Thank you for that question. That's a significant transition that NASA is working on, and I appreciate that subcommittee's focus on such an important issue. I think as we've been talking about research security here, it's the focus here has been the research part, but of course protecting our technologies is something that is much broader than just the basic research community. And many of the measures that are in place and the actions that have been taken specifically are about protecting our industrial technological capacity. The space station, though, I think is a great example of a place where the kind of research happens where there are so many opportunities, and we've had so many excellent international collaborations. So I'm sure that will continue to be a major focus for NASA and its work.
And those certainly won't go away. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from New York, Congresswoman Tenney, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, and thank you to the witnesses, and thank you for being here and your expertise. First wanted to address my question to Dr. Prabhakar. Did I pronounce that right? I would like to just draw attention to your expertise as the director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and also your previous position as head of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, otherwise known as DARPA. One of the many ways, and you just alluded to this in the last questioner, that we protect sensitive research is through the classification system. And I wanted to ask you a few questions about this process that may seem obvious, but I think it's important for the American people to know, since you are dealing with very sensitive information, whether it's China, Russia, other issues. And I just want to ask you the first question, because I'm sure you know the answer to this, but do you know the penalty for willingly retaining or leaking classified information under Title 18? It's technically Chapter 37 of the U.S. Code.
Thank you for your focus on this important issue. I have signed a number of documents in the course of my career as I have received security clearances. I don't know the specific penalties, but it was always clear to me that the legal reasons and the penalties were one of the many reasons I would not be disclosing classified information. So I know it's a serious.
The answer,
serious matter.
and I understand this is technical, but the answer is actually that it's up to 10 years of imprisonment for violation of that section. And so if the proper investigatory process found that an employee, say under your advice or someone in the department, knowingly and willfully mishandled and disclosed classified documents repeatedly, would you continue to provide that individual with classified information?
A serious violation of that sort would obviously require revoking of the clearance, and whatever other steps would be required.
Would you fire someone that did that?
I have not encountered that circumstance, but if allegations of that sort were verified, then of course there would be legal action, but also employment action, I would expect.
Okay, or at least a leave from the position in the event that would happen.
I can't speculate, but of
Okay.
course, it's such a serious matter, it would have to be handled it would have to be taken very seriously, obviously.
Thank you. And I know you're an expert on this, and I'm bringing this up just because it's obviously relevant to everything that's happening. But last week, Special Counsel Robert Hur concluded that President Biden knowingly and willfully removed, mishandled, and disclosed classified documents repeatedly over a period of decades, not just a few years. Special Counsel Hur also found that President Biden's cognitive decline was so severe that he likely could not convince a jury that Biden's actions were not willful. Either President Biden, in my opinion, as a lawyer, is mentally competent and must stand trial, or the cabinet must invoke the 25th Amendment, or at least look into proceedings on that to remove him from office. And I'm wondering if that's something that you would consider in light of the bombshell testimony that came out of the special counsel's office.
Representative Tenney, I can simply say to you that in my interactions with the president in many meetings, that what I have seen is someone who is very focused and digs into details and is very insightful.
Okay, so if he's
and-
very focused and able to do the details, do you feel that did he mishandle, I mean, the special counsel determined that he mishandled documents, so shouldn't he be able to stand trial on that?
I'm sorry, I'm not in a position to comment on the special prosecutor's report.
Thank you. I understand. Now, I just want to get into a couple questions on China, since China is such a sensitive information. And my concern is, obviously, in the scientific community, that researchers sometimes don't take the China threat as seriously as they should. And I was just wondering what the policy was in your office on China, how deeply serious these security threats are with China, and what you do in your office to make sure that that is something that we're countering every single day, that you can discuss. Obviously, this is sensitive information, but that's something that's clear in your policy documents.
Yes, thank you for the question. The focus of this discussion, of course, has been on research security and the issues for the basic research enterprise. I think we've covered that ground pretty thoroughly.
Well,
I think
let me focus it back to research, which is what we're talking about. These research proposals do go through rigorous scrutiny to make sure that that type of sensitive information is protected or disclosed to understand the China threat.
Yes, I'd like to draw a distinction. When the PRC or its agents are going after conducting economic espionage, trying to get into classified networks, of course we have very significant measures in place and action is being taken. There have been many measures relating to export controls and financial flows. For the basic research enterprise that we're discussing here, that most of that information is widely available. It's intended to be public and globally shared. We understand that there are some sensitivities, for example, sensitive data sets, and in those instances, there are policies and practices that are in place or in development to make sure that we are protecting those aspects.
Thank you again for your work. I'm out of town. I yield back. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair now turns to the gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Fauci, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to Ranking Member Lofgren for holding this hearing, and to our witnesses today. Dr. Prabhakar, I am honored to welcome you to the committee today, and I look forward to you coming to my district in North Carolina next week to participate in our AI roundtable. Artificial intelligence is a perfect example of the type of research we need to be thoughtful about when we talk about balancing openness with security. The U.S. must accept some level of openness will be necessary to catch up with China, which has advanced beyond us on certain AI technologies. However, AI is an example of dual-use research of concern, a technology that can be used for benefit or for harm. How does dual-use research of concern pose a unique challenge to OSTP as it develops policy guidance for federal science agencies?
Thank you so much for that question. I'm looking forward to being with not only you, but another science committee member in North Carolina next week. I think artificial intelligence is a terrific example of a powerful technology that, and we know how human beings, what human beings do with powerful technologies. They get used for good and they get used for ill. And the research aspects of artificial intelligence, the basic foundation for this technology, is something that I think we are very privileged to have a number of American researchers and companies who have driven the major advances that have happened in the last year or so. But I think it's important to recognize that they too are part of a global community. Many of these companies have research going on around the world. Just as an example, the DeepMind company, now part of Google, is in the UK, and they are one of the global participants in advancing this technology. So I think we have great strengths, and it is rooted in global research. And then when we get to the applications of a technology like artificial intelligence, this is where we want to make sure that we here in the United States are using AI, whether it's commercially or for public purposes. We want to make sure that we are moving really in a focused manner, moving fast, being aggressive about using this powerful technology in ways that are both responsible but also effective to achieve the great opportunities that it poses. And something we've talked about a lot in this administration is the fact that this AI is a technology today that every country around the world is racing to use to build a future that expresses their own values. And coming back to the issues that we've been discussing with the PRC, I think we're all clear that we don't want to live in a future that's defined by technologies that have been shaped by authoritarian regimes. And so yet another reason that as we use this powerful technology that comes up out of a global base, that we make sure that we are racing ahead of everyone else to put it to work for all the things that we need to have happen.
Thank you. How is OSTP considering AI specifically when it comes to the forthcoming policy guidance?
I think of this research security program guidance that we are working, that has to cover all areas of research. And in fact, that's one of the complexities because research is so varied. Artificial intelligence is an area of research in itself, and it is increasingly, it is a component in every field of research. It's hard to find an area of research today that isn't using the power of AI with the data that it has to be able to accelerate what people are doing. So I think that it will be, the research security policies will affect many different aspects of AI.
Would any other panelists care to comment?
Yes, thank you. The Department of Energy has been working with AI, particularly in the secure side also. And so what we're working on is a FAST project, Frontiers of AI in Science, Security, and Technology. And in this case, it's really important for this country to develop, for science and technology in particular, a big language model, a big model that pulls in a lot of data, that we can develop language models that help us go forward in AI, in science and security. This is a kind of model that companies wouldn't be doing because they wouldn't have had the secure side. So I think for science and technology, there's something very unique that we need to develop in AI for this country to stay ahead in the area of science, technology, and security. And because that's a huge element of our laboratories, that's why our 6 big high-performance computers, our exascale computers are ideal for doing what the nation needs.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Oklahoma, Congresswoman Bice, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the witnesses for being with us this morning. I want to start with Dr. Prabhakar, following up on an exchange that you had earlier with the chairman on the research security program requirements. Is OSTP committed to harmonizing the research security program requirements across all federal agencies?
Thank you for that question. That is exactly our goal, and I want to recognize again that federal R&D spans so many different mission agencies, and there are different needs in some instances. That's part of what we are wrangling in this interagency process that we're in. So we do want to make sure that we allow for sufficient flexibility, but at the end of the day, this won't work and be effective unless it's harmonized to a degree that allows our research institutions and universities to adopt and implement it sensibly.
Great. Pivoting a little bit, I want to talk about foreign talent recruitment programs. It's been a big topic in this committee in my time here. Dr. Kaiser, if I may, Congress defined malign foreign talent recruitment programs in the CHIPS and Science Act, which OSTP pointed to in the guidance for federal research agencies that was released yesterday. In your opinion, is the current definition sufficient to address concerns with malign foreign talent recruitment programs?
Yes, and. So I have to say, we really appreciate the fact that there is a definition of malign foreign talent recruitment programs rather than a list. Because if we have a definition, it points to the very concerning aspects of these programs that are concerning to us from a research security and research integrity perspective. Now, I do think that what we need to work on now is being very clear with this definition. So the definition has a Part A, which is the concerning aspects, and then a Part B, which is the countries of concern and those requirements. And then it also says international collaboration is excluded and is not part of this malign definition. So we have a big role now in communicating to the community of what this actually means. How can they identify what a malign program is, and how can they avoid being part of one? And I'll give you an example. There's a U.S. researcher who signed an application to be part of a Chinese entity to use his material science research for Chinese military purposes, and he's committing to do that. To me, clearly, that's a malign talent program. I don't know why you signed that, but certainly we need to go out to institutions and make sure that this doesn't happen.
Thank you. Do you think that Congress should address any of these concerns, maybe put more definitive sort of guidance out there, or do you think this is sufficient for now?
So, you know, I think that, frankly, there is some room because right now there's a Part A and a Part B of the definition.
Okay.
And my concern is that it might not be as clear as it could be.
Okay.
And so I think that there is room, and we would be very happy to work with your committee on some thoughts and making it even more clear.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Pivoting back to Dr. Prabhakar, let me ask, do you believe that the federal government is well equipped to identify malign foreign talent recruitment programs, and what, if not, what resources do you believe are needed to be able to do so? And Ms. Richmond may also be able to sort of chime in on that as well.
Thank you for that question, because implementation here is key. The guidance that we've developed is an important first step, and very much to Dr. Kaiser's point, now it's all about actually getting it out into the world. And I think we will learn more as we go along, but at the moment, I think the guidance is the first step that the agencies really need to be able to start being clear with all of the performers across the community.
Yes, following up on that, and a good question too. I think that the guidance is a really good start, but as we learned from our experience in our national laboratories, universities, this is a huge cultural change for them. This is a huge cultural change. And cultural change is going to be difficult because it goes all the way down to somebody working in a laboratory. And so it's going to be a real challenge for our universities to help through that culture change. It's not just setting up an office. It's also us from our agencies, because we fund universities too, is to be able to work with them to get them to trust us that our process.
Educating them.
Yeah, really educating them. And, you know, and to understand that, for all of us to understand, that every time you go out of your house in the morning, you face risks. But you figure it's getting wherever you needed to go is the benefit. So we have to figure out where that balance is. And in our national laboratories and in the Department of Energy, we're used to seeing threats come in and not going, oh, no, maybe we should just stop this person. Instead, we know how to do the balance of thinking about it more clearly, what other evidence, putting all the data together to come up with a decision. And I think the other agencies feel this way too. But I think the universities need to be ready to let people know in their institutions, their researchers, that this is really important, and they need to think a little bit differently about how they've done things in the past.
Thank you. My time has expired, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentlelady's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Frost, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. International collaboration among scientists, researchers, and thinkers accelerate the pace of progress such cooperation strengthens and doesn't threaten our national security. For example, using NSF funds, the University of Central Florida, which is in my district, sends students to South Korea to study semiconductor chip production. The reshoring of chip production is a key national security and economic goal and a priority for our committee. Dr. Kaiser, how do we make sure that American universities continue to have strong international partnerships and attract international talent while still securing their work from bad actors and unfriendly states?
Mr. Frost, thank you very much for mentioning that this is a wonderful example that you mentioned about collaboration with South Korea in semiconductors. And this is what we have to do to our communities, is we have to provide them with clear and tangible examples of beneficial, principled international collaboration and why it is. And we emphasize this in our research security training. We have a whole module on international collaboration. But with the semiconductor example, you could clearly see the benefit to the United States. You clearly see the mutual benefit also to the other country, the partner. You see how they're both contributing to the enterprise and the partnership. And so, to me, I think this is what we have to continue to communicate out. The 2019 Jason report had a nice set of questions that one can ask to be sure and feel comfortable with the fact that you really are entering into one of these principled international collaborations. And the questions are very much along the lines of what I said. Also, from our agencies, we need to continue to communicate about the beneficial international collaboration and how it's just an essential part of science. But that we do have countries of concern that are not playing by these rules, and if that's the case, that's not collaboration.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lauer. Disease doesn't respect borders. Improving Americans' health has to be an international thing. At the University of Central Florida, we have folks who are researching HIV in patients in Panama. But the pace of this kind of health research can either mean lives lost or lives saved. And so how do we make sure that research security efforts don't hinder or slow down life-saving work like what we're seeing UCF do with HIV patients in Panama?
Congressman, completely agree with that sentiment. There have been a number of examples of strong international collaborations done right that have saved lives. One example would be NIH-funded work on Ebola and developing treatments and vaccines for Ebola that have turned this disease from being nearly uniformly fatal to being something that's potentially treatable and preventable. I think one of the key points here is that we need to keep hammering in the message of both and, not either or. It's not either security and integrity or collaboration. It's both. It's both and. And actually, we have used the criteria that Dr. Kaiser referred to in that Jason report to help guide scientists and administrators into ways in which it's fairly straightforward to do things right.
Thank you. Do you have any other examples of collaboration between international researchers that have led to important healthcare breakthroughs?
Oh, you should.
Yes, so I think HIV is another incredible example, and this is an example of where we have, over the years, converted HIV into a uniformly fatal disease. I remember that from when I was a medical resident in Boston. There was nothing we could do. We saw these young patients die in front of our eyes. International work has now converted this from a uniformly rapidly fatal disease into a chronic condition. It's one of the amazing triumphs of modern medicine.
Did you want to add something, Madam Undersecretary?
Not so much on the health side, but I have to point out that we have many international projects, for example, in high energy physics and nuclear physics and fusion physics and many other areas where these big facilities can't be built by just one country. They have to bring these countries together to do this. So on these huge projects, it's just critically important that we have these types of collaborations. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Obernolte, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Prabhakar, it's wonderful to see you again. I wanted to continue the line of questioning that Congresswoman Eshoo started about the competition with China with respect to artificial intelligence. And I know you and I have had several conversations on this topic. I remain very concerned about the fact that the United States is falling behind in that competition. I know you're aware that in 2017, the PRC made a national commitment to being the leaders in AI development throughout the world by the year 2030. And I think they're pretty well along. Most people are aware that several years ago they passed the United States in the number of computer science PhDs that they're awarding. They'll probably award more than double the number we award this year. And you said something in your testimony that I thought was really interesting. You said it's be very unwise for us to allow an authoritarian regime to shape future technology like AI. But I think it's particularly poignant here because in addition to their investment in AI, the PRC has enacted some of the most stringent restrictions in the world on the commercial use of AI. So it's pretty clear they're seeing AI development through a military and a national security lens and not an economic lens. You and I have discussed several times the administration's executive order that they issued several months ago on AI, and as I've shared with you before, I think that there was some really deep thinking in there about making sure that the U.S. remains competitive. What can we do, Congress and the executive branch working together, to ensure that the U.S. doesn't fall behind China in the race to develop advanced AI?
It's great to see you again, Mr. Abernelty, and continue this important AI conversation. A very direct answer to your question is about the National AI Research Resource and the AI Safety Institute. These are two components of making sure that we step up, first to make sure that the data and the compute that are required for researchers broadly to get access to the ability to build and interrogate AI models, that's NAIR. And then the AI Safety Institute is a new effort within NIST that's just getting launched that is about making sure that we have the tools and methods to be able to tell how effective and safe and trustworthy an AI model is. That is essential for everything that we need to do with AI. Those are two specifics that I would point to. I really want to foot stomp your comments. A number of years ago, when I was at DARPA a decade ago, I saw this huge surge in machine learning technologies, this current generation of AI. I saw so many different applications for the work we were doing in national security and much more broadly. In the years, at that time, a lot of the concern we all had was that the PRC was using AI. Think about the amount of video surveillance information. Think about the amount of genetic information that government has. Those rich data sources used, again, expressing their values in building a surveillance state. They were, I think they surged ahead in the use of AI. And to my great delight, what has happened in the last couple of years is a surge ahead in the core technology with these large language models. Again, largely, in that case, largely driven by American companies. So we have this moment in time where we have phenomenal strength in this technology here in the United States. It is in the private sector. That's great. We want them to drive it, to accelerate it, to do it in a responsible way. But we also know that for public purposes and to make sure that we understand the safety issues with AI, that we need the public investment that exists across all of these agencies. You will find people using and building AI, but we know it's not adequate. And so this congressional support behind NAIR and then the AI Safety Institute, I think, are two concrete places where we can make some critically needed progress.
Right. Thank you. I think we're in furious agreement, especially on NAIR, and I appreciate you highlighting that because we're trying to codify that and establish NAIR permanently through the Create AI Act, which I and a few other people here are co-sponsors of. But thank you. We'll continue this discussion. Dr. Richmond, in my remaining time here, I wanted to ask about research security at DOE, and you talked about how that's part of your core mission. But as co-chair of the Fusion Energy Caucus, I couldn't help but think about multinational projects like ITER and the way that, that's 35 different countries coordinating. How do you ensure research security when the DOE is just a small part of the international collaboration on that?
Thank you for that question, because it is something that we think about a lot with our large facility, with these large international facilities like ITER. It is an amazingly important project. There are scientific sides to it, and in any country activity, there's going to be some political sides to it too, and then some security sides to it. So again, we have, with the different security processes that we have in place with our ARTES and our risk matrix, we watch that very, very closely. And it changes all the time, right? All of this is evolving, but we've been there, and we just try to do the best that we can. But I'm very confident in the kind of people we have at DOE to make sure we're making the right decisions.
All right, thank you.
for that
I see I'm over time. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Lee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Lucas and Ranking Member Lofgren, for holding this hearing. To probably go in a bit of a different direction as we continue to celebrate and uplift the contributions of countless Black inventors, scientists, and researchers during this Black History Month. I'm glad that today's hearing serves as a platform to further highlight the need for openness of opportunity as a tenet of scientific research. It should be recognized that American research competitiveness has often failed to recognize contributions of the Black community and many others, and we must consider this when discussing strategies to maintain security over government-funded research and development. The memory of the late Eddie Bernice Johnson, the first and only Black person to ever chair this committee, will continue to enshrine her legacy of providing access to career paths and opportunities in STEM for countless Americans, regardless of origin, across the country. Prior to the 118th, only once has there ever been as much representation from Black women, for instance, on this committee simultaneously. I'm proud to sit here today as part of another class of 4 with Reps Foushee, McClellan, and Sykes. To reiterate, when I chose to be a member of the Space Science and Technology Committee, I did so to help create a more equitable and just society, especially within the realm of STEM education and workforce. I continue to do so against the backdrop of unrealized dreams and potentials like those of Trayvon Martin, who once aspired to become an astronaut. I also look forward to protecting proprietary technology and scientific discoveries such as that of Henrietta Lacks, that it never happens again. I'm strongly of the position that the absence of Black, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC individuals in STEM research and development activities within federal science agencies poses a significant threat to security and integrity of research outcomes. Without people like us, not only hinders the scientific community from fully realizing its potential, but also jeopardizes the credibility and effectiveness of research efforts. So we can't tolerate racial profiling and racism as tools in ensuring research security. While we must always be wary of threats our adversaries pose towards our nation, my belief is that we are best served building resilience at home through supporting and developing the talent we have here at home. The people I represent look towards science and technology for innovation that will lower healthcare costs, bring clean air and water, and improve their living standards. Dr. Kaiser and Ms. Richmond, how are your agencies engaged in interagency collaboration with agencies like the Department of Education to promote science history education, especially the contributions of Black, Indigenous, or people of color inventors, researchers, or scientists?
Thank you very much for that question, Ms. Lee. And as you can imagine, we are extremely concerned, and we believe that diversity in STEM is an essential part of research security. The security of our nation is only able to occur if everyone is allowed to participate in the STEM enterprise. And so NSF did fund a $10 million award to the University of Pittsburgh through the Eddie Bernice Johnson Includes program. And this is to strengthen pre-college STEM programs to ensure we're reaching the full geographic and demographic diversity of the nation. We, of course, also have many partnerships with other agencies, and everyone benefits from these investments. However, we need to do more. As you know, one of NSF's main priorities is the missing millions, and we need to make sure that we all, across NSF leadership, not just in one area, but across what we fund, focus on this very important enterprise effort.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that question. Both Rebecca and I have spent a lot of time worrying about this. I do want to make one point, and it ties back to, on this particular issue, it ties back to the issue of the number of graduate students, for example, that we have from other countries. Right now, our graduate stipends are so low in these emerging areas of technology that it's hard for graduate students to make a living during their 20s, 5, 6, 7 years in graduate school. Our graduate stipends across the agencies are too low. And it hurts our underrepresented groups more than others because oftentimes they don't come to graduate school with any parental finances to help them through, or a car that can get them where they need to go. And so that is actually a huge factor in our inability to recruit and retain this talented group that we so much need. So the Department of Energy has stepped up and raised our graduate stipends to $45K a year, and I look forward to having the other agencies do that too. But I'm saying that we can't do this alone. I think it's really important that Congress step up and recognize that this is the kind of funding that we need to really get the young people into the system that are from all kinds of backgrounds, because those are the ones that are left behind. And if we get those numbers up, we don't have so much need for those from countries of concern.
Thank you. Time moves fastest when we're having the most fun. I yield back.
Absolutely. Gentlelady's time's expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Williams, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Kaiser, nice to see you again. You may not remember, but not quite a year ago, this is where this topic first came onto my radar. And the concerns that you and a few others highlighted was that there were serious problems. There was movement to have rules change, but there was a gap in enforcement, the ability to enforce these rules. Can you update me at all from that conversation, either pro or con of what's happened?
So I think what we've been doing as in the past year is, number one, as we said, making sure that we focus on consistency in approach. And what I mean by this is NSF works very closely with its Office of Inspector General. The Office of Inspector General does investigations into potential research security issues. They then make recommendations to NSF on actions, administrative actions it should take to reduce risk to the government. I believe that that's been a very close and good relationship. What we've been working on in the past year is in NSPM 33, as I mentioned, it says we should have information sharing mechanisms because many of these researchers are funded by NSF, Department of Energy, and NIH. And so we all need to be able to share information when we do see concerns here. So we've been doing two things. Number one, we've been ramping up our own analytics efforts, and we've been sharing the information on what we see through those analytics with our partner agencies. We also make sure that our offices of Inspector General also communicate very closely on these issues.
Thank you. Secretary Richmond, earlier you commented about a Chinese researcher who was in fear of losing their grant funding and, I don't know, promised or pinky promised or swore on a stack of Bibles that he was not related to the Chinese Communist Party. May I ask, have you ever been on a submarine, one of our nuclear submarines?
No, I haven't had the opportunity yet.
Well, the crew ranges from about 110 sailors to about 160. And they are very fine people. And some of the secrets that are being stolen out of American research actually makes it easier for the Chinese Communist Party and the PLN, the People's Liberation Navy, to find our submarines. It's the most important deterrent weapon that we have, and their crews. And I'm just trying to weigh the difference between the sensitivity of the Chinese researcher who may lose his grant and the 110 or 160 sailors that are on our nuclear submarines off the coast of China today. I just wonder how you balance that.
Well, thank you for that question. Let me go a little bit further with that. And to say what my advice was to this particular individual, having no idea of what his background was. I said the most important thing for you to do, because it wasn't so much losing his grant funding as it was that he would have to go back to China to do the kind of research that he wants to do here, which he would prefer not to have to do. But I said to him, the point is that research security is very important to all of our agencies. You will be, when you are putting in a proposal, you will be asked questions, and you need to be very honest and transparent with your university, as well as answering those questions about your current and pending support, because that's what we will be looking at, because we don't know whether to trust you or not. So, but I said, you're going to get in trouble if you don't disclose something and we find it. So that's why it's really important for whatever you're doing that you be as upfront as possible with what your background is, and give the responsibility to your university as well as your agency then, recognizing that you may be looked into it. But let me just
If I
also
may,
say-
just for the little bit of time that I have remaining, and I appreciate your concern for that person as an individual. I have a different perspective.
Yeah.
Pretty sure I'm the only member of Congress that was in Tiananmen Square in May of 1989, and visited Beijing University and the Freedom Wall, as you may recall. My very limited Chinese skills at the time was very interested in what the protests were about. We didn't know was coming at that point. This is after May 5th and before Gorbachev's visit. But I would say that in my subsequent studies at Harvard University for a year as a visiting student in the Chinese Studies, Asian Studies department, there were many of the Chinese leaders, student leaders, that had been exiled at that time. And they were deeply concerned about, at that time, 1989, the direction of the Communist Party, and we now see it in full fruit. So I'm afraid that our kindness and our goodness are not a good defense against a really purposeful enemy. Thank you.
I agree.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Ross, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Lucas and Ranking Member Lofgren, for holding this hearing, and I'm happy to see all of our witnesses here again. As was mentioned earlier, we're very much looking forward to hosting Director Prabhakar in North Carolina next week, along with my colleague Congresswoman Foushee, at our AI Roundtable, which will be held at North Carolina Central University and HBCU. I represent a district that is home to the Research Triangle, boasting several top research universities, companies, startups, and federal agency offices. And we've benefited greatly from international scientific research and the contributions from foreign-born scientists and international students. My first question, though, will go back to an issue that was touched on briefly, which is cybersecurity. And universities are increasingly the target of cyber attacks by both cyber criminals and nation-state actors to obtain sensitive information and pre-publication research. However, the cybersecurity of our research institutions has not been a central focus of research security discussions. To address this issue, the CHIPS and Science Act required NIST to produce cybersecurity guidance for universities conducting research. However, even with this good guidance, our universities often have tight budgets, and they're not fully able to address this guidance. I see Dr. Kaiser nodding first, so I will ask you how your agency is helping university awardees address cybersecurity risks as part of research security efforts. And then, of course, I want to go back to Dr. Prabhakar to describe your thinking about that.
Sure, and I'll try to be brief. Something that we are going to be focusing on, number one, is NIH currently funds secure data enclaves. And we are tasked to also fund secure data enclaves at universities and through our authorization. So we're in the process of developing that, number one, to provide that to the universities. Second, the Secure Center that I mentioned is going to be partnering with the REN ISAC, which is a cybersecurity consortium among universities to provide cybersecurity information and guidance out to them. So we're looking forward to that partnership as well. And let me also just mention the importance, of course, of cybersecurity education. So we fund, as you know, at Duke in North Carolina and many other places, we fund CyberCorps and cybersecurity education programs. That's essential from the ground up to make sure that we have this as part of the culture.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll simply add that there's, of course, a cost to upgrading cybersecurity. That's true for any enterprise, including these universities. But of course, the reason we're doing this work is we know there's a cost to not doing it, and we just have to confront that.
Okay. Dr. Lauer, do you have anything to add?
We are very grateful for congressional support on cybersecurity at NIH. It's become very much ingrained as part of our culture and also the culture of our extramural research systems. And so we very much appreciate that. We also work with institutions when unfortunate cybersecurity incidents occur.
Okay, thank you very much. Back to the issue of international collaboration. Many academic societies and Asian American advocacy groups continue to raise the alarm about racial profiling in the research security space. According to a 2021 analysis from the Committee of 100, many of the highest profile economic espionage cases tied to China have focused on academics, despite research institutions only comprising 3% of all cases investigated under the Economic Espionage Act. Given that this implies that bulk trade secret theft is not occurring at universities, what considerations are uniquely positioned within universities relative to industry? And Dr. Kaiser, I'd like to start with you.
Thank you. The fear that those in the Asian American research community have is real. It's real fear, and we need to acknowledge that, and we need to build trust and relationships. You know, I think it breaks my heart when I hear stories about fear. I heard a story about, you know, some law enforcement agents during COVID knocking on the door of a researcher of Chinese descent, and she wasn't quite sure why. This is something, of course, that we need to make sure that we deal with. The way we need to do it, in my view, is number one, build trust by interfacing. For instance, we have regular roundtables with the Asian American Scholars Foundation, and that's something that we need to do to not only communicate to them, but to listen to them and think about ways we need to collaborate together in this area. The second thing we need to do is make sure that our actions are scaled to the risk. So that's why I mentioned the information sharing on research security violations. We need to focus on the behaviors and the fact that we're not looking at the people and their backgrounds. That's hard, I think, for many to accept because we don't have the trust yet. Mm-hmm. So we need to give out more examples of the fact that this is what we're doing, as well as something in my view that I've talked to the AASF about, is we have to give examples of when someone came forward and corrected an error and we didn't take action because it was corrected. Those kinds of things have to get out there as well.
Thank you. My time's expired.
Well, his time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Franklin, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is such a critical hearing today, and obviously we feel that tension between the trust that we need to build in the scientific community, but also protecting our national security. Dr. Lauer, last year you published a summary of NIH's foreign interference cases, and to date, NIH has determined that 80% of compliance reviews had at least one serious violation, and in total, over half of the scientists were removed from NIH grants. Those stats are obviously very concerning. What actions can be taken to further prevent violations? It seems, as important as the compliance reviews are, it's kind of a bit of the horses out of the barn at that point. Are there things we can be doing to get out ahead of that and lower these stats by having those violations not be there to begin with?
That's a really great point. And I think one of the possible signs of success to date is that the number of new allegations that we have seen has declined substantially since 2019. And most of the new allegations that we have seen have actually come from institutions themselves, where institutions on their own discovered that there were problems as part of their outreach and due diligence. And so that gets exactly to your point, that what we really want to do is promote a culture of both openness as well as integrity and security.
Okay. Do you have the resources you need to perform these audits and do the measures like that?
Over the last few years, we have received additional funding. Our office has received additional funding from Congress to help us with our compliance reviews, also with our IT and our analytics. We are very grateful for that support, and we hope it will continue.
Okay. According to NIH Central Resource for Grants and Funding, approximately 80% of NIH's budget goes to support research grants, including grants to foreign organizations. And in the spirit of being collaborative, many of your grant dollars come without restrictions on them, which is, again, goes to building that spirit of trust and collaboration. How can we be sure these investments, especially those made with foreign countries, are protected from our adversaries?
So any grant that involves substantial work in a foreign entity has what we call foreign components. And before we allow those foreign components to go forward, we require what we call a prior approval. That involves consultation with the State Department. We give the State Department then opportunity to comment on whether or not there may be any foreign policy concerns regarding that project. So we have built-in steps in place in collaboration with the State Department to try to head that off.
Okay. And then we've got a couple of minutes left here. I'd love to follow up a little bit more, Dr. Richmond, and then also get your thoughts, Dr. Prabhakar, too, on the one of the aspects of research security that we don't focus on a whole lot is retention of the workforce. And, we obviously, if folks don't feel trusted or they feel threatened, they may leave and go elsewhere. But I'd love both of your thoughts on how can we work harder to build that trust that we need to what can Congress do to assist you in helping to develop the ecosystem that facilitates that trust that we need to ensure that the folks that we have that come to our institutions, they get educated, they got great things to offer, aren't just simply hired away by the CCP. It's one thing to be inside the program and stealing, but another if we can't retain them and they go elsewhere, it's the same effect. We have the brain drain.
Yes, it's really a tough one because changing culture isn't easy, and changing culture means that people trust what you've got at your institution. I think that, I can reflect on the fact that the national laboratories operate in many respects further ahead than our academic institutions, because when you come into work in one of our laboratories, there is a culture that we have a safety culture that's really, really important, that's embedded and woven through everything. And there's also a security aspects that's woven through everything that we do. So you think about safety and security, I mean just, falling off a ladder. But the point is that we've developed that culture in the laboratory so that somebody that's coming in, like you would hope they would come into a university wanting to get grant money, that they buy into that culture when they first come in. And it's trusted because it's been there for a while. And so I think being able to get universities to the point where security is woven into everything that they're doing. So the researchers really understand that this is about the nation's competitiveness in particular areas. In this case, there are 6 particular areas that we worry about with regards to AI and quantum and bio and 6 different areas. But it's those areas that we've built that culture around. So that's what I would say.
I appreciate your comments, and Dr. Prabhakar. And sorry, I'm out of time, but I would love to get your feedback maybe later on. How do we develop that ecosystem so that we retain the best and brightest, and while we still have that trust that's necessary. But thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman's time's now expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Tonko, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank the chair and ranking member for holding this hearing. And thank you to our witnesses for being here today, and more importantly, for your excellent leadership in supporting our nation's research enterprise. As many of you noted in your testimonies, research integrity is a key part of research security, and research integrity is buttressed by strong and uniform scientific integrity policies. With the influx of new resources from the landmark CHIPS and Science Act, it is important to ensure that we can make the most of this opportunity to strengthen the U.S. research enterprise and keep it clear of all threats to research security, including domestic political interference, distortion, or indeed disruption. Scientific integrity is a cornerstone of federal scientific activities and something that I've made a priority during my time in Congress by authorizing the Scientific Integrity Act. So a question to the entire panel. How could stronger and more uniform scientific integrity policies help mitigate risks in research security and integrity? Anyone want to start? Mr. Lauer?
Thank you. So I think integrity and security are very much overlapped, and virtually all the cases that we have seen, there have been integrity breaches. The integrity breaches often manifest themselves as dishonesty, outright misrepresentations of certain past activities. I am reminded of a report that was put out by the National Science and Technology Council in 1999 about the government-university partnership, and it pointed out that one of the core principles, exactly as you say, of a successful research enterprise is integrity, and specifically the integrity of every individual participant. When there is a breach of integrity, that threatens the credibility of the entire enterprise, and that means security as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the panel?
I think to say that we are as secure as our weakest link. And so that's why it's important for us to focus on a broader spectrum of issues that we're looking at than we might have in the past. I also think what would be helpful is for the CHIPS and Science Act, that part of that is just authorized and not appropriated yet, and I think that would help us go forward too.
Sure. Thank you.
And I'll just add that research integrity, of course, is essential to what we're talking about. What we also are starting to focus more said there is the integrity of the research itself, and then there is the way that other countries are causing fear or manipulating faculty members, et cetera, that are violating freedom of speech, that are violating academic freedom, that are intimidating them. So to me, we have to look at the broad picture, including integrity and including these other areas of foreign malign influence.
Thank you. Dr. Prabhakar, since research integrity and scientific integrity might be discussed as two sides of the same coin, how would you recommend agencies structure policies related to that research security and scientific integrity to leverage these commonalities?
Thank you so much. I think my colleagues actually spoke to this so beautifully. And I think it's worth recognizing that the purpose of the scientific enterprise is always to improve the scientific process and to get better and better at understanding ground truth. And that, to me, is what scientific integrity is all about. And I think Dr. Kaiser made an important point about that is complementary to protecting against illicit activities from countries of concern. But they all get wrapped up in a package of what are the behaviors, and to the Undersecretary's point, these are cultural issues about how we conduct the science and technology that's so important for our country.
Thank you. Well, scientific integrity is a key ingredient in securing our research enterprise, and I hope that this committee and the administration can continue to work together to ensure strong policies across our federal research landscape. Another piece of research integrity and therefore research security is ensuring our researchers and institutions conduct rigorous, reliable, and replicable research. Dr. Kaiser, in your written testimony, you discussed the importance of safeguarding taxpayer investments to research security. How can agencies help safeguard taxpayer investments and ensure that federal funding is being used for that replicable and reliable research?
So I think over what we have been doing quite a bit, and frankly, there's a lot more to do. We have instituted additional training for our program officers and program directors, because what we want to do is make sure that the researchers themselves whom we fund have the freedom to conduct their research. But we also have to be very clear and communicate to our program officers that their job is to ensure that the reliability and the integrity of the research itself and the research projects. Now, I have to say that this is a challenge, because one program officer can be overseeing 100 projects at one time. But I think that it's extremely important to make sure that there is that oversight, to make sure that the funds are used as the researcher says they're going to be used, that they produce results that are then made open and that are reliable.
Thank you very much. With that, my time is exhausted, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Strong, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Lucas and Ranking Member, and our witnesses for sharing their expertise today. Dr. Kaiser, I'm sure we can all agree that we need ways to cultivate and grow our workforce that understands research security and that we can work in an academic setting. I often hear from researchers in my district that they are hesitant to work on restricted research due to the constant hurdles they must jump through. What are some of the nuisances involved in training a workforce prepared to deal with the growing research concerns in academia?
So NSF, when we fund research, we fund fundamental research and we ensure that it is not restricted research. That being said, that's why education is so important, because that doesn't mean that everything should just willy-nilly occur in a lab without the safeguards that we talked about and being put into place. That's why we have to provide the resources for research security programs to make sure that they understand, as Dr. Richmond said, that what we want to create is a culture, like a lab safety culture, but of research security without these additional restrictions. Now, the Jason reports have spoken out quite strongly that they do not like controlled but unclassified information. And that is something, of course, by law that we do need to deal with. And so I think that's something that our agencies are trying to figure out, how to fund CUI research in a way that doesn't cause additional administrative burden on labs, et cetera, and that's by building a culture.
Thank you. Are there ways to involve law enforcement and intelligence and the intelligence community in this workforce development?
Yes, and I have to say, we work very closely with the intelligence community and law enforcement. If you look at where we started in our communication as far as what research occurs and how research occurs in the academic setting, when we started this conversation in 2017, it was two completely different lenses through which we were looking. We now communicate very closely. NSF and DOE and HHS were part of the National Counterintelligence Task Force, where we have these conversations and we need to work together. And so I think that we've come much more to a good understanding of how research occurs in the labs. At the same time, we need to still move forward, frankly, with the researchers themselves, understanding what it really means to safeguard this research, so more work to be done.
Thank you. How can NSF promote a strong research security workforce at our universities, and how can federal agencies better leverage expertise in cities like Huntsville, Alabama, which is home to the second largest science and technology research park, to train the future workforce?
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned training the next generation of research security workforce. I've been thinking a lot about this because I do feel if we're going to promote this culture, we need to figure out a way to encourage and support the workforce in research security that understands this balance between openness and research security. So what I'm thinking about is we're establishing a research on research security program, a funding program. And I would like to use an element of that funding program to train that generation, next generation of research security workforce.
I think one of the great statistics that I've learned in recent days, the University of Alabama in Huntsville, 72% of their graduates never leave. They stay in the research park and Redstone Arsenal area, and I think that right there shows a lot of hope for what all of us are concerned.
Absolutely, creating that culture.
Thank you. Dr. Lauer, many international students take advantage of optimal practical training, OPT programs, which allow them to obtain employment in the U.S. for up to 3 years post-graduation. In 2022, OPT benefited more than 117,000 students with F1 visas. How can we assist research institutions in coordination of DHS to screen foreign national students and restrict potential bad actors from receiving OPT authorizations?
So this is not an issue that I have, or our office has been personally dealing with, so I think what would be best would be for me to research that and get back to you.
Thank you. According to the NIH Central Resource for Grants and Funding, approximately 80% of the NIHS budget goes to support research grants, including grants for foreign organizations. In the spirit of being collaborative, most of your grant dollars come without restrictions. How can we be sure that these investments, especially those made in foreign countries, are protected from our adversaries?
So as part of our standard processes, whenever a grant involves substantive work that's occurring in a foreign country, we require what we call prior approval. And this is prior approval for what we call a foreign component. And what we do is we work through the State Department. Every such grant like this is then sent over to the State Department for their review, and they will then inform us if there are significant foreign policy concerns.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Dr. Baird, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the witnesses for being here. I always learn something in these meetings with the talented witnesses that you have here. But I got to tell you, Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate serving on a committee with you. You're very organized, you're very methodical, and I know exactly what you expect of me. So I commend you on that.
You are a great underclassman.
But I have a research background, and so the issue we're talking about here today, I strongly believe that research is going to be our way to stay ahead of the rest of the countries in this world, including some of our adversaries. And so I really understand the open platform and the reason for that. If you have an open platform, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. But as every one of you have mentioned, the concern is, how do you do that? Keep people stimulated, and I've heard you say that, but I still want to emphasize that we do have to pay attention to what our adversaries are doing, and sometimes it seems innocent, but the piece of information they get may be key. And I know you know that, but I just want to reemphasize how important I think that is. So my first question is, Dr. Lauer, this committee has heard from researchers that they are blamed when identifying foreign threats, as it reveals a weakness in their security systems. So how can the federal agencies sincerely protect and support our researchers to address vulnerabilities without impacting their strength to identify threats?
So I think a major part of this is enhancing a culture in which it is understood that we can have both integrity and security, as well as strong science and strong international collaborations. And in many respects, we get quite practical. Dr. Kaiser referred the Jason report, which has some amazingly good advice, which we've actually used to help individual scientists as well as university administrators develop international collaborations that do exactly what you're saying, that assure high-quality science, effective science, but at the same time ensure that the interests of all parties are being appropriately protected.
Thank you. Dr. Probakar, the CHIPS and Science Act that we passed here a year or so ago directed the development of a training modules for NSF that was launched last month. The legislation also requires a certification that all federally funded grantees complete an annual training on research security policies and foreign threats. So how do you expect universities to certify this requirement before the research security program guidance is finalized?
Thank you for that question, and that again is part of the urgency I'm feeling to get that done and to wrestle through all the complex issues that we're struggling with on the research security programs. The CHIPS and Science Act is such an important step forward. The training piece is critical, and I know that NSF has been able to make some good progress with that. The CHIPS R&D component at the Department of Commerce is ramping up now. That we had a great launch event last week for that. And I know that Secretary Raimondo is particularly focused on that, on the workforce component. So again, I think that's getting that right is completely share your focus on that.
So either of the two of you left have any comments in that regard?
We look forward to coordinating, of course, on the research security program standards. And we also are moving forward with a certification of the training. So we're entering it into our policy guide that the researchers on NSF grants, who usually also get grants, I said, from these other agencies, are going to need to certify that they've taken this research security training.
Yes, and I would say that at the Department of Energy, we're coordinating very much with our other agencies to make sure that the training that we provide is consistent with what everyone else is doing. It's an evolving issue, and we have to make sure that the training that we create evolves with the threats that come to us. So thank you for that.
Thank you, and you completed well on time. Mr. Chairman, I got 9 seconds left, so I yield back.
I am impressed, Doctor. I'll let an Indiana member question any day. With that, we turn to the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. McCormick, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate this and this topic, especially. We recognize the United States is the leader in research and development with some of the brightest minds and the greatest ideas. We don't always support the R&D the way that people want it to, sometimes from government, sometimes from private entity, but collaboratively, we've been leading the way in AI production since the beginning of its inception. Research and innovation are the crux of American dream. The idea that people from all over the world with different backgrounds can achieve success and prosperity through hard work, determination, and initiative is the basis of our society. Just a few weeks ago, I had a pleasure of visiting the AI Hub at Georgia Tech. We have 3 silos. It's amazing. I watched this production of amazing technology where you get to actually design the hardware and software together to work in this next advancement in technology so we can do some really special things. In Georgia, I think when we lead the way, 3 of the silos of the 30 are right there in Georgia, which I'm really excited about, and how it can apply to everything from healthcare to engineering to literature and you name it. That is the future. With that being said, though, we live in a time where real national security threats exist, and we must ensure that our universities and research systems have clear guidance in place to ensure that we are safeguarding our critical research programs from foreign adversaries, specifically the Chinese Communist Party. I've watched them develop their AI over time. They've invested a tremendous amount of resources, all from their government, all guided by them, and a lot of times for nefarious reasons. And they're also able to produce with their slave labor and their manipulation of the market a very cheap product. Unfortunately, all of our AI production is in Taiwan, which Chinese Communist Party has openly said they will take by 2027. And the CHIPS Act, by the way, didn't solve that. So I'm very concerned. Dr. Lauer, recent reviews of the Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General and GAO have raised questions about the NIH and its effectiveness in monitoring and overseeing its award recipients, particularly for grants involving foreign subrecipients. In January 2022, H&HS Office of Inspector General recommended that NIH implement enhanced monitoring, documentation, and reporting requirements, quote, for grants with foreign subrecipients, and NIH agreed with the recommendation, but subsequently stated that it may need to obtain additional authority. My question is this: can you elaborate on what additional authorities are required and what steps the NIH has taken to implement this recommendation?
So I think we have some good news there, which is that we've been able to implement all the recommendations from that audit. One of the things that we did was that we provided a guidance or a clarification guidance that indicated that all foreign recipients have to make available to their prime domestic recipients information that informs progress reports. So that would include laboratory notebooks, original electronic files, and they have to do this in a timely way, which would typically mean at least once a year, if not more often than that. We put that out in the Federal Register last June. We received comments, we responded to the comments, and we put out a final policy last fall, and that policy is now in the process of being implemented.
Okay, I just want to point out that whether it be the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, which China belongs to both and has manipulated brilliantly in the over 20 law cases which they lose, and then it gets better at cheating, the WHO, where we have serious questions about what happened with COVID and its development, just another agreement with other foreign subsidiaries and recipients doesn't really go into accountability. Just because we have an agreement doesn't mean you don't cheat. And that goes into arms wars and everything else that we've seen the international community cheat at. So I don't want to just see rules and agreements. I want to see oversight and accountability, which is the bigger part and the harder part of what we do. And could you address that?
We completely agree, and as you may know, we've had a case in which a foreign subrecipient refused to provide information that our agency was requesting. That resulted in termination of their subaward, and even more than that, it led to debarment of that foreign institution for 10 years. So we do take accountability very seriously, completely agree with you.
Okay, I want to point out, too, that even in drug protection, amoxicillin, Augmentin, and other drugs that we have produced overseas, specifically in the CCP, that we do a very poor job of holding them to the same standard. We have our own people held to account. In other words, we investigate our hospitals, our drug makers, our manufacturing constantly, and yet the very things we rely on China for safety and production, we don't do. And when we do it, we give them an announcement, we give them warning, and we do it very infrequently. So accountability is something we need to do much better job of those foreign subrecipients than we do with our own people. And with that, I yield.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman's time has expired. It appears that all of our colleagues who were available for questions have asked their questions. Therefore, I want to thank the witnesses for their valuable testimony and, of course, the members for their questions. This has been a very productive hearing. The record will remain open for 10 days for additional comments and written questions from members. The hearing is adjourned.